Let's take a quick look at the end of chapter 16. We studied about the appointment of David, or his anointing by Samuel to be the future king of Israel, and how he was selected to come and play the harp before Saul because he was such a skilled singer and player of the harp that people knew his reputation, and he would be able to soothe the king when he got these fits of depression. This evil spirit came upon him, that the music would soothe him and the spirit would leave him. And let's see. Let's start in verse 19. That's sort of the paragraph here that we're looking at. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, Send me your son David, who is with the flock. And Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread and a jug of wine and a young goat, and sent them to Saul by David, his son. And David came to Saul and attended him, and Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David now stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. So it came about, whenever the evil spirit from God came to Saul, David would take the harp and play it with his hand, and Saul would be refreshed and be well, and the evil spirit would depart from him. So we're told about David's anointing, how he came to be at the court was because of this special service that he could do. Again, when you read in the next chapter, we're going to read about him defeating Goliath, and that bringing him to Saul's attention, and David becoming a great warrior. And it could be that these are not necessarily in chronological order, that one of them is given kind of an overview of how David served him in one way, and then the other is telling about subsequent events or earlier events that happened that brought David to his attention. Really don't know. We know from the way that the book of Chronicles was put together, and Kings, and probably First Samuel as well, that Samuel wrote part of the book, and maybe Gad the prophet wrote part of the book, and Nathan the prophet wrote part of the book, and the stories are collected together, and that could be an explanation for some of the repetition that you see in the book that happens. So there's just a lot we don't know about every detail of the background of the book. Well, this brings us to chapter 17. Kind of see how the forces are arrayed here. Of course, it's the land of Judah, and then Benjamin, and then the tribes of Israel to the north of that. And Gibeah is the capital of Saul. Ramah was the headquarters where Samuel lived and prophesied. There's the city of Jerusalem that's right on the border between these tribes. A part of the city still belonged to the Jebusites, and later David's going to conquer the city and make it his capital. Bethlehem is the city of David. It's called Bethlehem Ephrathah, is the way it's described, and David was anointed there. It's about 7 miles south of Jerusalem. At this time, in the valley of Elah, the army of the Philistines is drawn up in battle array on one side of a wadi, or it's one of these dry riverbeds that has water in it in the rainy season, but it's dry the rest of the year is a wadi, and it's at that wadi between two hills that are there, right on the border, is where the armies are drawn up in battle array, and it mentions this Soko, where the camp of Saul is going to be, and Azekah, or the two armies are near to those two cities, and they're lined up on either side of that valley that runs through there. It's out of that river wadis where David's going to get his 5 smooth stones that he's going to pick up to put in his shepherd's bag to slay Goliath. Goliath is from the city of Gath. When the battle is over, they're going to chase the Philistines back to the walls of Gath. So sort of give you a little bit of a picture of where these places are that are described in the next chapter. Okay, so 17, 1 through 3, it says, Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah at Ephes Dammon. Says Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. So, given a description, of course, the people of Israel would be well aware of these places. The land of Israel isn't all that big. It's, like 90 miles north to south. So it's not a very big place. And people would know all of these hills, all these valleys when they were reading the book of 1 Samuel, or it was being read to them. And many have gone over there to tour those lands and walk in these very places and see what they're like. And there is a valley there in that place and a creek that runs between the two. There's a picture that you can see online. You got the camp of Saul, would have been over on this hill. And over this way is the camp of the Philistines. And then you have this valley in between. And the river that runs between the two, or the wadi that's there. And that's where David is going to cross over. And Goliath's going to be out here in this area somewhere. You can see it represented here on this map as well, where they're lined up on either side of this valley. You can see all of those smooth water eroded stones that are in that valley. You easily pick up all the stones you wanted if you were using a sling to be able to go into battle. So everything is just as the Bible pictures it. You were to go there and stand in that place. This is the border between the Philistines and the Israelites. Gath 7 miles west, northwest of Soko, and these two cities are 5 miles apart. Ephes Dammon means border of blood. So I guess there were going to be a lot of blood shed there. This day maybe is why it's named that, or there's blood that's been shed there in battle many times in the past, but that's quite a name for this location. And then forces are arrayed for their mutual advantage to keep an eye on the other. And have this place here full of these smooth stones. Then verse 4 says, Then the champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So you begin to describe this giant, and of course there are many artists' representation of what Elijah would look like. He is certainly an unbeatable champion, is the point when he is described. It's like there's no way you could possibly defeat him. David is a type of Jesus Christ. And Christ came into this world to fight Satan. And how strong would Satan look to all mankind? Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the world forces of this darkness. And Goliath, as far as an earthly specimen, is a pretty good representative of what the evil power that Christ was up against. But yet he defeated him and set us all free. Well, David's going to do the same thing, foreshadowing that. Unbeatable champion. Isha is the word there. It's the word for a man, but it's used in an intensive, mode in the Hebrew, which means he was a great man or a champion man that came out to fight this battle. He's from the city of Gath, where the Anakim were, or the giants that lived in the land even before the Philistines. They're like Mycenaean Greeks that came and invaded the land, probably back during the time of when Israel was in captivity in Egypt, and settled along that coast. And these Anakim, these giants, lived in the land before that, and some of them survived. Some of them are a part of this family. We're told when the spies went in to spy out the land, they saw some of these Anakim there and said, "We just look like grasshoppers in their sight, these big men." And they exaggerate how powerful and big they were and how they couldn't take the land. And of course, Joshua and Caleb said, by all means, we should go up and take the land because God is going to give them into our hand. There's no reason to be afraid of them. In the 70, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, instead of 6 cubits, it says 4 cubits in a span, which would be 6'9". I don't, what text were they using that we don't have, that they used, made Goliath was a little shorter? 6'9" is a lot easier for us. We see that all the time, right? In the NBA and in the NFL, there's guy. Some of the OU linemen we've had some of them that were 6'9", and they are giants compared to me and you. But he may have been, maybe the other reading is the better reading that's come down to us in the Hebrew text that we have that exists to this time. A cubit is from the tip of your middle finger to your elbow. The average, they say, is 18 inches. People used, I mean, you look at people in the Middle Ages and you look at their suits of armor, and they were all like, 5'4" or something. They weren't, their cubits would have been shorter than what the measurement of mine is. So you can see it's a very round number. It's very imprecise measurement. It can be 3 or 4 inches off according to whose cubit you're measuring with. A span is from the tip of your little finger to your thumb when you stretch it out like that. That's about 9 inches. So if you take that as a literal 18 inches and literal 9 inches, if you're using a hand as big as mine, then it would be 9'9". Now, does that count from the bottom of his war shoes that he had on? I don't know if he had a big heel on them, or how big of a sole was on his shoes, how high his helmet stuck up. If it's talking about the top of his helmet that was on top of his head, we know they had big feathers stuck up on the top of their head. Maybe it's counting that. But he was quite huge. Let me show you a few pictures of people that are around in modern times. Here's the tallest man that's ever been recorded. This Robert Wadlow in Illinois. He was 8 feet 11 inches. That's pretty close, isn't it? I mean, that's not. You put a big hat on him and he's going out to battle, he'd be the same size as Goliath. So it's not like totally out of the realm of human possibility that this race of men that were there were huge like that. And that was in 1940. He only lived to be 22 years old. You can see his father standing next to him. Maybe an average sized person. And David going up and fighting this guy. So you can see why the Israelites were so terrified when he come out there and fight this battle. I thought I'd show a few more pictures here. Here's the tallest man most recently measured. He's 8'3" basically. He's from Turkey. He was measured in 1982. And here he is standing next to a man normal size, the size of him, walking down the street in China or somewhere, and how small all the people look next to him. So this isn't just some fantasy idea that there could be a guy that big. There are people around now. What about people that are playing and that are actually athletes that are playing? Here's one of the taller basketball players. It's 7'8". He's standing next to LeBron. James is 6'8", and then person that's 5'10", he's a giant. What do you think in that picture? There's Michael Jordan, Yao Ming. He's 7'6". He's a giant, and he's athletic. He can run around. He can play basketball. He could carry a sword. He could go into battle, and you'd have to go out and face a guy like that. So there are people like that in the world, and it describes then his armor for us in verses 5 through 7. It says that he's and he had a bronze shield on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He also had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. And the shaft of the spear was like a weaver's beam. And the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield carrier also walked before him. So this, again, just to show the power that this enemy has. He's got a bronze helmet, which literally means the high or helmet, the top. And it's made of bronze, which would be heavy, I guess. It probably have leather as well. Scale armor, so it's not It's not chainmail armor like you might get the idea from the King James, but it is plates of armor that are sewn together that make up this armor that he's wearing. Pieces of like a scale, like a fish has, that he is wearing. And he's clothed with these overlapping plates, and they weigh 5,000 shekels of bronze, which is about 125 pounds. You think about somebody carrying a pack in the army. I mean, how much do you guys carry? Fully loaded up and going into battle. 60 pounds, 70 pounds. What do you think, Brody? What would you put on the weight? Maybe 100 pounds. 105. So this guy, just his armor, just the armor part weighs 125 that he's carrying around. And then he's got these greaves that are protecting his shins that have bronze in them that he's wearing to protect that part of his leg. And he's got a spear, a javelin that he carries, and has it slung around his back. And he has another spear with the shaft the size of a weaver's beam. I guess it's like, I looked it up, 2.5 inches across. So it's a big beam that you would have when you were you were weaving. You've got a 600 shekel iron tip on the end of this that weighs 15 pounds. Think about a 16-pound shot put. And he's got the end of his spear weighs that much that he's carrying. So a mighty, invincible man. It doesn't say he has an armor bearer. So the actual word there that's used means a shield carrier. So he's got one guy just to carry his shield out there for him. And so that you have that pictured in the drawing there, guys holding this big giant shield just to carry that around for him. Imagine he gets behind that and he's got everything else covered. How would anybody have a chance against this giant in individual combat, which is what Goliath is going to call for? You can see the intimidating factor. He looks invincible and intimidating. Everybody is terrified in the Israeli army there. We're told in verse 8 through 10, he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, "Why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. And if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us." And again, the Philistine said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." So he gives the shout and challenge. We're going to see this going to go on for 40 days. Nobody is taking him up on it. So on the 40th day of trial, and that's something how numbers work out in the scripture so many times. 40 days and 40 nights it rained. 40 years in the wilderness. 40 days he defies Israel till David shows up. And then David puts an end to it. But he is a contest of champions. This is, again, the thing some scholars say, point back to this Greek Mycenaean culture that we read about in Homer. That you had, Paris and one of the Greek kings that fought against each other in a battle like this. So it might go back to their tradition, this one-on-one, and they'll all decide who's going to be in charge. And they still have that idea in mind. So the loser will submit to the other, and he defies Israel. He reproaches them, he's taunting them, he's insulting them. Send somebody out and fight this battle. We're told then about the reaction of the Israelites in verse 11. It says, "When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid." So they are terrified when they see this giant come out on the field with all of this armor on and make these boasts and challenge them. They're not putting their confidence in God to help them in this situation, but they're full of terror. They're demoralized. And at this opportune moment, the future king of Israel, the type of Christ, gets sent up there to the battlefield and is able to hear this man say the things that he does. In verses 16 or 12 through 16, it says, Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years among men. The three older sons of Jesse had gone after Saul to the battle. And the names of the 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and the second was Abinadab, and the third was Shammah. And David was the youngest. Now, the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock at Bethlehem. And the Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand. So, as you look at the account, it tells us about Bethlehem, and it calls the people that live there Ephrathites. In that famous prophecy in Micah, it talks about out of Bethlehem, Ephrathah is going to come a ruler who's going to rule over all of the earth, and he's going to last forever. So David comes from that city, from Jesse, and the son of David, Jesus Christ, is going to be born in that city. And he's going to come forth and fulfill that prophecy someday of being the ruler of all the earth and the savior of men. It's called Ephrathah all the way back in Genesis. You remember when Rachel died in childbirth and she was buried there, and had the tomb of Rachel. Benjamin was born, and it's called Ephrathah. Fruitful is the idea of that word. So the word, I guess, to help identify it with any other Bethlehem anywhere else, it's Bethlehem Ephrathah. So it has both those names attached to it. The one in Judah. We're told Jesse was quite old at this time. He had 3 older sons that were in the army. Of course, that leaves several other sons, like David, that weren't in the army. I don't know if they had some, if you sent 3 off, that was enough. You had to send all the rest. I don't know what out of his 8 sons, the 3 oldest go. You had to be over 20 years old to bear arms. David was pretty close to that age. We know he's not, probably 10 years later, he's going to become king. So it's thought maybe David was 16 to 18 years old at this particular time. And he would go back and forth to Saul's camp. It was 18 miles away. But he hadn't been there for 40 days because he hadn't heard Goliath. So he's not aware of what's going on until he gets there. And here's these things that are being said. The challenge that's being sent forth. So David is sent by his father to take food to his brothers. You see something about how they voluntarily supplied what the army needed, what the soldiers needed. Then Jesse said to David his son, Take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of your brothers. Bring also then these 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000. And look into the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of them. For Saul and they and all of the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So Jesse is a wealthy man, wealthy enough to help supply the army. He's already supplied them with the 3 sons. And so he sends off these provisions at the hand of David. An ephah is about 40 liters, or half a bushel, that he sends up. And then he also, along with this parched grain, it's something to bear in mind. In the King James Version, it says corn a lot of times. And when we think of corn, we think of maize. And maize is something nobody ever saw until they came to the New World. So corn in King James English was grain. That doesn't mean the same thing as corn to us. So it was roasted grain that he took. And 10 cuts of cheese. And the commander, and of course you can see they're divided up into different ranks. And here's a commander of 1,000 that are present on the battle. He's to look into his brother's welfare. Literally the word there is visit. Like when Moses went out to visit his brethren, saw the Egyptian beating the Hebrew out to kill him, and then he killed the Egyptian. And we're told that we should visit the widows and orphans. It doesn't mean you just go say hi to them, but you're looking into their welfare, seeing what you can do to was doing when he was looking into the welfare of his brothers. And he is to bring back their pledge or their assurance about their well-being to their father. And the armies are reminded of, drawn up in battle array, the valley of Elah. So David comes to the camp of Saul to greet his brothers, and he hears about this challenge that is being brought forward. Says, so David arose early in the morning and left the flock with the keeper, and took the supplies and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. And Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array against army against army. And then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. And he was talking with them, and behold, a champion, the Philistine from Gath named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines. And he spoke these same words, and David heard them. And when all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So David gets there to the battle scene and is able to go out personally witness this Philistine defying the armies of Israel. And he's heard about the reward then that is going to be given for the slaying of this man. You look at these great rewards that he'll be enriched, and he's going to be able to marry the daughter of the king, and his father's house will be free in Israel from all taxes. It's quite a reward, and then it's something for 40 days. You've had this man coming out and make the challenge, and not in all of Israel is there one man willing to take up Saul on this great reward. I guess they're all figure it's a reward you're never going to get to collect if you go out and fight this giant. Because nobody will take it up. They're all fearful when he walks out on the battlefield. And so David continues to investigate this situation. Verses 26 through 30. So David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done to the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should taunt the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in accord with his words, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. So you can see David is very skeptical, wondering why in the world somebody doesn't go out and kill this man. He doesn't have any doubt in his heart that anybody with God on his side can go out and kill this man. He's not just defying Israel, he's defying God by coming out and taunting them in the name of his gods and defying the armies of Israel. So David is a man of great faith. This uncircumcised Philistine is nothing compared to the living God. Why doesn't somebody go out? So word gets around about what David is saying. They tell him again what the rewards are. So he investigates this further. And his brother overhears all of this talk in verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard, and when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle. So here you have an older brother that didn't learn much from David's anointing by Samuel, that he is a very special individual. And no matter what other people may think about his reputation, his oldest brother doesn't have respect for him. I don't know if he's jealous of him and his faith that he's showing, but he reproves him in front of everybody. Tells him he's wicked for leaving those sheep there when we had it specifically stated in the text that he left the sheep with the keeper. He wasn't out there contrary to his father's orders to come out and to bring those supplies, so that's a false charge. But isn't this a type of the way the brothers of Joseph treated him and the way Jesus Christ was treated by his own brethren when he came to this world to save us and to be our king? That his own brothers didn't believe in him. His own brethren put him to death on the cross. And so David foreshadows that his own brother was the one that's accusing him and running him down here. And he answers the older brother just as a younger brother would. He says, but David said, what have I done now? It's like, I don't think maybe he's heard that 100 times in his life. His brothers picked on him. What have I done now? He says, was it not just a question? And he goes on asking people about this situation. That he turned away from him to another and said the same thing. And the people answered the same thing as before. So he's got several different witnesses to tell him that if he goes out and kills this giant, that he is going to get all of these great rewards for doing so. He's certainly ready to take them up as far as this challenge is concerned. We're told in 31 and 32 about him bringing this before, he's brought before King Saul. So word spreads rapidly through the camp about this young man of faith. It says, when the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. David again expresses his complete confidence to take this man on and to put him to death, and take this reproach away from Israel. There's no reason for anyone to be afraid. I noticed these two different illustrations. One of them, he looks a lot younger, I think, than in the other illustration. David was not some little bitty kid that went out there on the picture. He's a man. He's a young man. I mean, who do we send off to war? There are a lot of 17, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds in World War II. They claimed to be 18 that went off to war that we all know about. So he was big enough that Saul offers him his armor, and he at least tried to put it on. If he was some little 9-year-old or something, he wouldn't have been able to do the point. So he must have been close to Saul's size. He's maybe still a little shorter, but not a lot shorter. So it wasn't a ridiculous thing for him to put his armor on. So we got to have some accurate picture of what David was like when he went out to fight. Then in verse 33, then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. So this man has been nothing but a warrior, trained up to fight. And if you don't have the experience or the age, you go out, it's just going to be a slaughter if you go out and fight with this man. But he doesn't know about David's background, what kind of experience he's had growing up, and what kind of faith he's had in God. So he begins to fill him in on the experiences that he has had. He's killed a lion, and he's killed a bear. Verse 34, but David said to Saul, your servant was tending his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. So, I'm pretty impressed that he was able to kill a lion. And when they raised up against him, he was able to slay him. That was a lot like Samson, what Samson did to lions. So he's had some experience of being filled with the Holy Spirit, evidently, and been able to fight against these powerful creatures and overcome them. And God is with him. He's certainly not afraid of any human being. I mean, what doesn't matter if it's Yao Ming or whatever basketball player it is, he didn't have a chance against a bear. A bear would rip that basketball player to pieces just like he would one of us. And so would a lion. So David has already handled situations like that. You can see his confidence that he has. I went out after him and attacked him and rescued him. He's the fight of the year. He knows God will be with him. And David said, the Lord who delivered me, he doesn't take personal credit for being able to defeat a lion and a bear. He knows it was the power of God that helped him. Your servant, it says, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. So, go do it. Go deal with it. Pretty good testimony there on his behalf. So he tries to arm him with his armor. Again, the king had special equipment that he could put on him, but not something David has experience in fighting with. Then Saul clothed David with his armor and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with armor. And David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. So David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. And David took them off. Don't you think that's probably a key thing in his agility and his ability to do what he did? Is that he didn't go out there all weighed down with armor. And, he relies on what God's given him to defend himself before. And so he's going to go out and trust in the weapons that he's used as a shepherd to be able to carry out this fight and win this battle. So you have a picture there again. I know some people get the idea that the sling that David used was like a slingshot that we would use, but it was this long piece of leather with a pouch in it that you put a stone in and spinner around your head, and they were expert at releasing one of those leather straps at the right exact moment to let the stone go. We're told about some slingers, left-handed slingers from the tribe of Benjamin that were able to hit a hair's breadth when they were slinging those stones. We think hour after hour out there with those sheep in the wilderness throwing those rocks, but you get where you get hit in it after a while. And so it's a deadly weapon that he has. It was used in warfare. So when he hits him in the forehead with this rock, it's like shooting him in the head with a pistol or something. It's not some child's weapon he's using when he goes out to fight the lion. It's a deadly weapon that he carries into the battle. So David tested the armor, and he took his stick in his hand, his shepherd's staff that he had, and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, even in his pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And then the Philistine came on and approached David, and the shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy, and with a handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you have come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. So he sees this warrior, the champion that Israel can send out, and he's this young teenage boy, handsome in appearance, dressed as a shepherd, with the shepherd's weapons to drive away dogs and things of that nature. And he says, you insult me that you would come out here and think you can fight with me. Come to me, I'm going to cut off your head, feed you to the birds. So he certainly tries to intimidate him with his words, and just show his disdain for him, and he curses him by these false gods. But David, you have to give it to him. He has a very great retort to this. It shows his total confidence in God as he speaks to him. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you, and I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the birds of the earth. the beasts of the earth, and all of the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hands, or into our hands. So David has absolute, complete confidence that he comes in the power of God, the creator of the whole universe, that has done many great wonders in the past for his people. Even in recent times, through Jonathan, he delivered them. With just Jonathan and his armor bearer. So what is this Philistine? He's going to, this is a match between God and the God of the Philistines. And there's no doubt about who's going to be able to win in this battle. He's going to deliver not only one man, but a whole army today. Verses 45 through 47. We have all those famous words there, delivered by David to that Philistine giant. So it comes in the name of God. Goliath will be killed. He will be beheaded. He's going to deliver the Philistines, are going to be destroyed. It's all going to be because of God, his power. It's not going to be because of David's power or any sword or spear, but by the power of God. So he knows very well that the battle is the Lord's battle, and Israel needs to learn the lesson. So, well, we'll have to come back and take up at verse 48, Lord willing, next time.